version now. All right, so during the 3rd year of King Jehoiakim's reign in Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord gave him victory over King Jehoiakim of Judah, and permitted him to take some of the sacred objects of the temple of God. So Nebuchadnezzar took them back to the land of Babylonia and placed them in the treasure house of his God. Brother Penny, up to verse 6.
Then the king ordered,
put it up. Yeah. There we go.
Then the king ordered Aspenaz, his chief of staff, to bring to the palace some of the young men of Judah's royal family and other noble families who had been brought to Babylon as captives. Select only strong, healthy, and good-looking young men, he said. Make sure they are well-versed in every branch of learning, are gifted with knowledge and good judgment, and are suited to serve in the royal palace. Train these young men in the language and literature of Babylon. The king assigned them a daily ration of food and wine from his own kitchen. They were to be trained for 3 years, and then they would enter the royal service. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were 4 of the young men chosen, all from the tribe of Judah.
The chief of staff renamed them with these Babylonian names. Daniel was called Belteshazzar, Hananiah was called Shadrach, Mishael was called Meshach, Azariah was called Abednego. But Daniel was determined not to defile himself by eating the food and the wine given to him by the king. He asked the chief of staff for permission not to eat these unacceptable foods. Now God had given the chief of staff both respect and affection for Daniel, but he responded, I am afraid of my lord the king, who has ordered that you eat this food and wine. If you become pale and thin compared to the other youths your age, I am afraid the king will have me beheaded.
Daniel spoke with the attendant who had been appointed by the chief of staff to look after Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Please test us for 10 days on a diet of vegetables and water, Daniel said. At the end of the 10 days, see how we look compared to the other young men who are eating the king's food. Then make your decision in light of what you see. Brother Penny, 14 to 17.
The attendant agreed to Daniel's suggestion and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, Daniel and the 3 friends looked healthier and better nourished than the young men who had been eating the food assigned by the king. So after that, the attendant fed them only vegetables instead of food and wine provided for the others. God gave these 4 young men an unusual aptitude for understanding every aspect of literature and wisdom. And God gave Daniel the special ability to interpret the meaning of the visions and dreams.
When the training period ordered by the king was completed, the chief of staff brought all the young men to King Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and no one impressed him as much as Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, so they entered the royal service. Whenever the king consulted them in any matter requiring wisdom and balanced judgment, he found them 10 times more capable than any of the magicians and enchanters in his entire kingdom. Daniel remained in the royal service until the 1st year of the reign of King Cyrus.
The word of the Lord to us.
Amen.
Thanks be to God. All right. So this is where my message is taken from today. And of course, hopefully most of us would know the story of Daniel. You've heard a bit of it. If you haven't heard it, just a real quick summary. You've got the people of Israel who were living in Israel, and they started to backslide. They were disobeying God. They did that for many years, and God allows this evil king, this wicked king by the name of Nebuchadnezzar, this godless king. He was the king of Babylon, to conquer the nation of Israel. And so he comes, he loots, and he plunders the nation of Israel. And of course, as the passage says, he takes sacred objects out of the temple, and he enslaves the people of Babylon. Listen, Babylon was no place that a child of God would want to be. Okay, it was a horrible place. Think of the most horrible place in the world a place that you would not want to live, and that would have been Babylon. And they are now living in Babylon as slaves. They have no rights. And among them was a group of teenagers, one of them being Daniel. And by the way, I highlight the teenage factor, the young men factor, because this is relevant to our young men as well, not just the older men. When we talk about this issue, this challenge, this charge to manhood, Daniel was probably towards the end, but was probably at a point in his life towards the end of high school. When we speak of Babylon, just so you know, we're speaking of what is modern-day Iraq. And just like in every nation, whether we like it or not, there are spirits at work. This is a little bit of spiritual warfare, that there is an evil spirit at work in most nations, and not every nation is the same. By the way, this is a good place for me to say that if you are watching television, if you're watching an evangelist from a particular country, and he gives you a word, make sure that it is a word that's relevant, because the spirit of the place where he's living may not be necessary what you're dealing with. Does that make sense? I've seen this happen oftentimes. I speak to folks. Well, the prophet who lives in South Africa says one thing. Here's the issue. The issues in South Africa is very different than here. And so there are different battles, different issues, even within the city. When we were doing ministry in Rockland, it's completely different. The spirit over Rockland is completely different than what we'll be dealing with in Ottawa. So be careful about whose spirit you subject yourself to. And so, but the spirit at work in Babylon, I mean, was, like most spirits, was in complete opposition to God. And remember, everything that God creates, Satan tries to duplicate. He tries to counterfeit. And so, and I submit to you that the spirit of Babylon is still very much alive today. And you will see, hopefully, some of that as we continue to teach. We find Daniel, who is now a citizen of the kingdom of heaven. He's living in a nation ruled by the spirit of Babylon, a demonic spirit. Don't miss that. He's a king. He's a citizen of heaven, right, living in a place that is ruled by a different spirit. And it's like being between two worlds, because what happens in Babylon is the opposite of what is supposed to happen in the kingdom of heaven. And Daniel had to decide, which kingdom rules will I live by? Which kingdom culture will I live by? That's the choice that most of us have to make. Will I live like my unbelieving friends, my unbelieving guy friends, or will I live like Jesus Christ? You know, Daniel, think about this. Daniel had an evil culture around him, an evil spirit ruling the culture, trying to influence him. But Daniel had the Spirit of God in him, pulling him out and helping him to live according to the kingdom of God. And when we read Daniel's life, we realize that Daniel had to make some choices that I think every man ought to make in order to be a kingdom man. But Daniel had to make some decisions, or he had to make some choices that I think every man had to make. If you want to be a godly man, you've got to make those choices. And so last week we talked about the battles of manhood, and this week we're going to talk about the choices of manhood, the choices of manhood. Ladies, this is important because you're gonna want to understand when the men make some choices. You want to connect yourself with men who've made these choices or who are making these choices. So be alert. Choosing to be men. That's our topic for today. Choosing to be men, and this is significant because it's just relevant in more ways than one in today's culture. Somebody got it. So. Choosing to be men. And listen, brothers, these choices, when we make them, they will help us to be victorious in the battles. And so there are some things, as I read through Daniel, there are some things that I saw happening that is still happening in today's world. I mean, the same spirit is at work. The same spirit that was trying to shape Daniel's identity and influence Daniel's spirituality. The same spirit that was trying to get him to assimilate and abandon his religion, take on a new identity. If you have young people in your life, that same spirit is very much at work today in our society. So the choices of godly manhood. Number one, the very first choice, brothers, is be intentional about friendships. Daniel had 3 friends, and you've heard it said before. So he clearly was intentional about friendship. You've heard it said before, and it is true. And I want every young man and every older man to say this, to hear this rather, is that your friends will determine your future. I look at some of the older guys, no disrespect, but I'm like, oh, you know, I could see there's a bond, there's a connection there. And they're all alike. Okay? Your friends determines your future. That's not just true to tell young people, it's true for older men. Because some guys have never gone further or done better because they didn't have the right kind of friends. So they get together and they talk about, remember Johnny? Yeah, no, Johnny now is running a company, Johnny. And these guys are just here wishing they were Johnny. Let me just speak to the ladies. If you're dating a man, if you're interested in a guy and he has friends, he's most likely like his friends. So that's the whole idea of group dating. Don't just date him all alone. Like, get to know his friends. Because that's going to give you a good idea. Am I making sense to somebody? Probably never thought about it. That's going to give you a good idea of what he's like. And if he has no friends, that's a problem. I would say if a man don't have friends, avoid said man. Because now you're going to have to be a friend to a man. That's... Now, I know you ladies, well, of course, I'm his friend. I'm his best friend. I find that stuff kind of weird. I'm not saying you cannot be some kind of a best friend, okay, wow, I feel like I'm standing on sinking sand. But you listen, folks. Listen. You want a man who is being influenced. If he is his only influencer, that's a problem. If YouTube or his pain or his sorrows are his only influence, that's a problem. You need a man who is under some kind of influence. The challenge is, who is influencing him? He's got to be under the right influence. And when a man does have friends, look at his friends, because his friends determine his future. Why do you think most parents get scared when their kids bring certain friends around? Something innately said to them, oh no, you will not be like that one. You heard the saying. I'm sure your grandmother told you like she told me, show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are. And this is biblical. Proverbs chapter 13, verse 20. Every parent should remember this for your teenagers. Walk with the wise and become wise. Associate with fools. I didn't say it. Associate with fools and get in trouble. And if you have a smart kid, so you call him my friend a fool? But I didn't, the Bible said. Okay. And here's why this is important. If your friends are fools, they will hurt you. Hang out with fools and literally just watch your life fall to pieces. And so the New Testament also says that bad company corrupts good character. You could be a man following the Lord, loving Jesus, but if you don't have friends, no matter how much you love the Lord, once you start hanging out, if you don't have the right kind of friends, once you start hanging out with the wrong type of guys, you'll end up acting like the world. Can I say this, ladies? That's why we need your help to make sure that you're encouraging the men to be in church. Their free will my toe. Like encourage them to be in church. Because there's a benefit. The more they hang around guys, godly guys, the better it's going to be for you. And brothers, this is important. That's why you need to be in church without some lady telling you need to be in church. You need godly friends. For some of us that are guys, we're in church. It's great, but we want you there too. So whether it's prayer meeting, Bible study with general discipleship, show up in church. Men's fellowship, show up in church. Here's why this is important. Every man at some point in time will face a crisis. And when Daniel's crisis came, Daniel was able to call his buddies and pray and ask God for direction. He had friends to help him in the crisis. And this is why it's important. Because men who do not have friends, or men who, or maybe guys, you have some friends. You probably, maybe they're not friends, they're probably acquaintances, maybe they're casual friends. Here's the thing, you got to build a relationship. You just check up on each other. Here's the beautiful thing. You say, Pastor, I don't like to talk. I know, I'm with you. I don't like to talk either, believe it or not, and I talk for a living. But I don't, but thank God for text. So, use the technology to your advantage. Stay in touch by text. And here's the beautiful thing, guys. When we hang out together, you really don't have to talk much. I trust me, I've been there with some of these young guys in the church. We're together, and you just almost feel like, okay, there's a spirit of hunger. Like nobody says a word. But you can just feel that spirit of hunger So it's time to look into food. It's an amazing thing to experience when you hang around a bunch of guys. Or when it comes to time for everybody to kind of leave, because as guys, ladies are a bit different. But guys, you hang out and there comes a point in time where you're just like, I'm done. Got nothing else to say. I don't want to play anymore. I'm ready to go. There's just something that happens. It's not as bad as it sounds. or as it seems. Don't let the ladies fool us, you know. They can be talking for a whole long time, like world without end, you know. But, and this is not Bash Lady Sunday. That's actually June 22nd. Or 21st, whatever the Sunday is. But guys, we need to be intentional. We need friends, and we need to build our relationships. And don't be intimidated. It's okay to ask a brother, how's your week? Don't say it loud. You know, you just like, so you're good? And when a brother says you're good, just be like, yeah, or I'm not. You know, just do something about it. Are you hearing me? The problem is that men who have no friends, we walk around. Anybody knows Chuck Norris? Okay, I'm not too old. Yeah, I mean, you know, we are on Chuck Norris. No, that was a lie. We should have, or John Wayne, or who, I don't know, Zorro, you know, like we just me and my sword and my bandana. No. We're not supposed to do life that way, okay? Daniel had relationships before a crisis came. So when the crisis came, he had somebody to call, okay? And ladies, don't force him to make friends, but encourage him. Let him know it's okay. A good thing is, oh, Lord. A good thing is if you have a husband who's hanging out with friends, right? It's probably not a good idea what time are you coming home? It's probably not a good question to ask before. Okay, you know what? I'm just going to keep going. Because then the guy's just like, why? You know, but encourage it. You know, so it's okay to hang out with the guys. Okay, you know what? The stares coming back at me are just like, I don't know what to make of it. So we'll stick to the notes. But if your partner says he's going to hang out with some guys, let it happen. If you're concerned about it, you were concerned about it before anyhow. Because you should have known he didn't have good influences. Now all of a sudden you're worried about him hanging out with his friends. It's a little too late. So, brothers, if you're going to build friendships, you need men who love God. Men who love the Word of God. Can I also say men who love church as well? Men who don't, you know, so they don't talk nonsense like, I don't have to go to church to get saved. You don't have to go, okay, tell your wife that. Imagine a husband says, oh, I don't have to come home to stay married to you. That's what happens. I don't have to go to church to get to be saved or to be Christian. I don't know a woman who'll be like, wonderful, it's a great marriage. He never comes home. You need men who love God, men who you can be angry with. In other words, men who if you're angry, you can be angry among them. Sometimes if you want to cry, in the way men cry, you need brothers like that. Don't run from it. If you're having a bad day, it's okay. Like it's I can't wait for the day to see like two brothers just over there, like, yeah, just, you know, like we don't have to do, you know, when ladies are crying, my goodness, we don't have to do that way. You know, if a man starts to cry and all you can do is just, that's all, just keep beating him. That's all. It's okay. Just whatever. It is uncomfortable, but what's important is just, and then eventually go, let it out. It's okay, let it out. And it just becomes, because sometimes we do need to cry. You know, one of the problems when you have this whole only the man and the woman, sometimes men needs buffers. There's some things before you tell your kid, before you tell your wife, before you tell your boss, tell your friend. It'll save you a lot of headaches and trouble, okay? So make sure you have good friends. Make sure, here's an important point when we talk about friendship. Teach your children how to make friends. Teach your children how to choose friends. This is so important, every man. You need to teach how to choose friends, what qualities to look for in friends, and also teach your children how to let friends go. Because sometimes you can have a very close friend, and eventually that close friendship moves from being a close friendship to an acquaintance, and that's okay. You've heard me say this before. It's like building a building. When you're building a building, you need scaffolding in order to go high. But once the building is built, you need the scaffolding? No, it blocks the beauty of the building. So at some point in time, you have to move the scaffolding away, and that's okay. But you gotta learn how to do friends. You gotta teach your children how to do it. So men must be intentional about friendships. Did you get me, brothers? So that means every brother should be building a friendship, okay? And don't start from, well, I don't like nobody. You don't know yet. Don't look for somebody that you like. How can you know you like somebody when you just look at them? You have to love them and then talk with them and you realize, oh, he's not that bad. All right? Okay. All right. So let's go to number 2. Be intentional about masculinity. This is a big one. This is the ones where I'm always like nervous about YouTube and the forces. Because it's not, we don't really, have you noticed there isn't much a thing as masculinity and femininity anymore? It's almost like everything's unisex. Have you tried buying clothes lately? But we got to be intentional about masculinity. When you read Daniel, you realize, and as I read it, and I know some of you that are deep in theology might have a different perspective, I'm going with this one, that it's very possible that Daniel it was very likely rather, that he was castrated. It's very possible. Now just think about it. Be intentional about masculinity. Daniel was taken captive in Babylon. He was chosen because he was smart. He was good looking. Well, you know what I'm talking about. Do you have an example? And so now he's placed in school for 3 years. He gets this training, and he now goes to serve in the king's court. Here's the problem. Now this is why you have to interpret scripture with history, okay? The king's court, most likely, he was an ungodly king. There's a 99% chance he had a harem. If you don't know what a harem is, it's what you guys do on Instagram. Let it settle. Selah. Thank you, Holy Spirit. Yeah, because, we don't have harems anymore, but you got your phone, you got your Instagram stuff. Well, anyhow, okay. I'm getting in so much trouble today. I'm definitely moving to 3 Trouble Street. Okay. And so understand, this king had his harem, and Daniel is in Babylon, where he's got this ungodly king, and the king has all these women that are part of his royal court, and he brings, listen carefully, these young, good-looking, smart, intelligent men walking around. Okay, the king is smart enough to know that whether it's the men or the women, there could be a problem. So naturally, he has all the men castrated, the men who work in the royal court, and of course this is biblical. Now you say, what does this have to do with masculinity? Men today are not encouraged to be masculine. The spirit of Babylon is still very much at work because we're being castrated in different ways. What is happening in today's world is that men are being challenged to deny their gender and their sexuality. There's a whole thing about any age, your kid can come home and say, you know what, I've decided I'm no longer what God made me. This is a very real spirit at work in the world today. This opposition to masculinity is not new. And the challenge is for us to be like Jesus, brothers. Jesus was a man, he was masculine, he was godly, he was loving, and he was caring. He was never sexist, he was not misogynist, and he was not chauvinistic. So that's not what I mean by being masculine. You don't walk around like woman. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Like if you like your life. And by the way, do you know that Paul was preparing us for the last days? Somewhere in Corinthians, I think Paul says, act like men. In other words, be strong, be brave, be courageous. And it's interesting because we're living in a time where we no longer adhere to the teaching. The Bible that says that God created man in his own image, in the image of God. He created him male and female. That is Bible. It will always be Bible, and it will always be true. You can change the physics all you want. Truth is truth. Now, having said this, let me say this. No matter what the truth is, though, we walk in love. You don't push truth on people if they don't want it. But you hold the truth in love. Did you hear me? And so masculinity starts with being like Jesus and learning from Jesus and living like Jesus and loving like Jesus and leading like Jesus. And Daniel was able to live like a man even though the culture around him sought to emasculate him. So men has got to be intentional about our masculinity. There are some practical things we do because it's just masculine to do it. Okay. Number 3. Be intentional about sexual purity. Be intentional about sexual purity. Let's be real. I know you're in church, but let's be real. Every warm-blooded man at some point has desires and interests when it comes to sexuality. Okay, I thought the brothers would have said amen. It's okay, brothers. Remember? BU. So every warm-blooded man has some propensity towards sexuality. Now, when you do that stuff, you make it easy. I don't have to go. Because now I get to every brother has urges. Oh, that's your response to it? Politically correct don't get you. Okay, I see. But we all have instincts. Own it. Yes, sir. Own own the urges, own the instincts. Isn't that part of the problem, though? The church, the God who created sexuality, the very church says, let's pretend as though it doesn't exist. We got a whole book dedicated. I don't care how you read Songs of Solomon. You can see Jesus in every page, and that's great. But them two was making love all day, all night. But we got to cover this thing. But anyway, because you tell our young people, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, do it. And they're like, do what? And then you wonder why ladies are lacking stuff and men are, because, okay. And they go to the world to get advice on how to, okay, all right, okay. Anyhow, so be intentional about sexual purity, okay? Now let's put some history context. Daniel was young, but he was a sexually pure individual. Now, that's one side of it. But think of the possibility that this dude must have been castrated. There is no way that he'll have the kind of sex life that he desired. Now, I'm speaking to the men on this one. Because he still had to make the right choices, despite the sexual frustrations that he would have been facing. A castrated guy working in the royal court where there's a harem. Can you think of anything more frustrating than that? And this is true for young men who are trying to manage their sexuality, and this is true for older men who's already been sexual. I mean, you've already been sexually active, and now you're married, and you're realizing, man, like I'm not having the sex life that I imagined or that I envisioned. There are still no excuses to be sexually impure or immoral. And by the way, do you see what's happening here? The whole idea was not only sexual frustration, but sexual confusion. And that's what the spirit of Babylon does when it comes to sexuality. Create confusion and frustration. Let me give you number 4. Brothers, we got to be intentional about learning. Be intentional about learning. Every man ought to be reading a book. I don't care if you're reading the book in an actual book or if it's a Kindle or whatever it is. Every man ought to be learning something. They captured Daniel, and the Bible says they sent him pretty much to the University of Babylon to learn. By the way, this is relevant in different ways. Let me say something about this whole university idea. This is so relevant to today. They send him to university where he essentially becomes brainwashed for about 3 years. Okay? He has to learn the Chaldean language. He has to learn their literature. He has to learn their culture. He has to learn about their gods. He's presented with their religion. Those of you that have children going to school, or those of us that have been through school. And we can safely say that Daniel's grades were high, but Daniel did not believe all of what he learned. And I want my young people to pay attention here, because you can learn something without believing it. Be polite, be respectful, be attentive, study, pass all the exams, work with your professors, but you don't have to believe what you are being taught. Our children needs to see men being genuinely intelligent. You see, here is the thing. When the brothers are learning, what you're learning helps you to think differently. And not only will it make you better in some ways, but what happens is when your children now have questions or they start learning stuff, you're able to help them navigate what they're learning. Does that make sense? Have you ever been watching television? And this is something that you have to be alert for. When you're with your children and you're watching TV, don't just take a blind eye. Because there are some things that you would see on TV that you need to say to your kids, that's not right. After you've had a laugh, the dog rescued the dad. After you've had a laugh about it, say, son, can we talk? That's not real, though, okay? Because I expect you to look out for your sisters. We won't call Floppy or whatever your dog's name is. This is real stuff. And so you got to be alert on those things. Brothers, have educational conversations with your children. Those of you that have you were not born here, don't get ignorant. Talk about, well, I don't know the system. Learn the system. Figure out how it works. And don't just stop telling your kids, well, back home, this is how we did it. You're confusing the kid. Where's home? This is home. Back, what is, and then you have, because they're not going back home. Back home, you had a village of people. But you got to teach your children how to think through what Babylon is teaching and saying. And you got to teach them in a critical way. Right? Raise your children to be innocent, but not naive. Because innocent kids don't get into as much trouble as the naive kids. The gang members are looking for the naive kids. Over sheltering, you got to shelter your kids, but over sheltering them don't prepare them for life in the real world. And it might be crazy, but be real. Realize that at 19 or whatever the age is, 21, there's going to be a tendency. Well, no, you know what the world says? You're legal. What's the first thing you can do? Drink. It's your... Okay, oh, Lord. Drink, not drinking, but there should not be something exciting to your kids from other friends about drinking at 19. Because somehow the way you raise them is like, I don't want that. There's no fantasy to attain. Because by the time they're of a young age, you're having mocktails and you know, so it's like, okay. Okay, all right. But generally the church was like, well, we don't go to the club, we don't do nothing. That's why a good portion of kids, when they become of age, what do? They want to see the club. So you may have to do some strange things. I knew a kid, I won't call any name, but when they were graduating, I mean, prom was an interesting thing. You heard all kinds of stories about prom. But my thing was like, okay, you want to go, no problem. But I'm like 10 feet away. But you don't tell them that you're there. See, you guys, you got to know how to do it. Don't say that you're there, but just be there. Yeah, you got to sit there, bring a book. Call, is everything all right? Yeah. You get what I'm saying, though? So they feel that because I promise you, the moment they get in trouble, there's a certain level of intimacy that's built up that they can trust you. And you know they're going to do something stupid because you're going to be there. Here's the problem with being, can't tell you a secret. Here's the problem with being there. You see things that you don't want to see. Like, look, why is he talking to you? What was he talking about? And then be like, how do you know he was talking to me? What? The Holy Spirit, you know. But then even if you see something that you don't like, pick your battles. Just let it go. Be like, all right. But you gotta be smart about it. You know, anyhow, let's get to the other point. I hope you get what I'm trying to say about this. I think these are choices that men have to make. And I commend Daniel's parents. Because think about it. This kid must have been raised right for him to be in this situation and still make the right choices. Let me give you number 5. Number 5, men's got to be intentional about working. Be intentional about working. This is not just work. Okay? This is about doing your best at a job. This is about doing a job as unto the Lord. You get up early, you go to work on time. Oh, as a matter of fact, you get to work early. Be intentional about working. Here's something that I gleaned from the passage, right? Is that, I don't know about you guys, I've heard preachers talk about how God promoted Daniel and all that, but Daniel didn't have the great job at the beginning. Just think about it, right? Daniel had to do his job under pressure. He was a slave under this evil king. Most likely he was smart, intelligent. There are some people who probably didn't like him. He had to work through some jealousy. Okay, you can't relate to that? Okay, Daniel had to work with people who celebrated Pride Month and he didn't. Oh, okay. Daniel had to work with people who dressed up at Halloween and he didn't. And part of his job included denying sexuality or being castrated or wherever you want to put it. So he's going to work sexually frustrated, always running the risk of being tortured or being killed by the king, working in fear and manipulation of what will happen, some sort of fear of his life, or if not fear of his life, of losing his life, but fear of losing his job. Yet Daniel does his job as unto the Lord, and he gets promoted. He was loyal to God through his job. And God honored him. Brothers, you may not have the job that you want, but it is a job that you've got. It is a job that you've got. It's the door that God has opened for you. So do that job to the best of your ability as unto the Lord. Let me give you number 6, last one. Be intentional about worshiping. Be intentional about worshiping. So, friendships, masculinity, sexual purity, learning, working, and worshiping. Ladies, does that look like a good list? But when I talk about worship, I want to give you the meaning of worship. Worship means to ascribe worth to. And every man must be intentional about who you ascribe worth to. Every man must be intentional about who or what you ascribe worth to. When I read the passage, Nebuchadnezzar tells him, eat his food, to eat the king's food and drink the king's wine. That's diabolic communion. You know, we have the Holy Communion. If Daniel had participated, that would have been devil communion. I wonder how many devil communion sessions we've had. Eating the food and drinking the drink of the world. The king is inviting him to partake with his spirits. And Daniel must decide, no, I'm going to worship God. I'm going to ascribe worth to God. Here is the point I'm trying to get at. When you choose to worship God, and I'm not just talking about worship God as lift your hands and sing. Your lifestyle must be a lifestyle of worship. Where how you take care of your wife. I told you last week something that really gets me. When men don't take care of their homes and take care of their spouses when they can. Fix the stuff. Or get somebody to fix it. You know, it's an act of worship. At the end of the day, so Pastor, she's miserable, and Pastor, she nags me, and if I ask her about you, I'm sure she'll have some things to say too. Don't go quiet. But here's the thing that I have learned. Marriage is done as unto the Lord, not for your wife. So God is looking at you. That's his daughter. That's his daughter. How do you want somebody to treat your daughter? But think about how God is with his children, though. How you will be with your children. So when you're dealing with your wife, that's the mindset you got to get. That has helped me. It's not that everything is perfect, but I do it as unto the Lord. And what happens, this whole thing about worship, beloved, is that sometimes when you choose to do things God's way, to live a life of worship to God, you suffer for it. That's what I'm trying to get at. But real men says, you know what? I'd rather suffer than have pleasure. There are 2 things that Daniel had. God and friends. And if I could challenge every man, these are 2 important things you need in your life. A relationship with God, a relationship with friends. And then when you make these choices, I think it helps you to have a better relationship with God, and it helps you to enjoy life better because you have good friends.